Hey, welcome back, guys. We are going on with the adventures of Hiccup and Toothless. Hiccup the Viking and Toothless the Dragon. So let's just get started. Chapter 8 Training Your Dragon the Hard Way. Hiccup was still pretty certain, knowing dragons as he did, that yelling was the easiest method of training them. So over the next couple of weeks, he tried yelling at Toothless to see if he could make it work. He tried yelling loudly, firmly, and strictly. He looked as cross as he could, but Toothless wouldn't take him seriously. Hiccup finally gave up on the yelling when Toothless stole a kipper off his plate one morning at breakfast. Hiccup let out the most fierce and frightening yell, and Toothless just gave him a wicked look and knocked everything else onto the floor with one swipe of his tail. That was it with the yelling as far as Hiccup was concerned. Okay then, said Hiccup. I'll try going to the other extreme. So he was as nice to Toothless as he possibly could be. He gave Toothless the comfiest bit of the bed, laid dangerously balanced on the edge of it himself. He fed him as much kippers and lobster as he wanted. He only did this once, though, as the little dragon just went on eating until he had made himself thoroughly sick. He played games with him for hours and hours. He told jokes. He brought him mice to eat. He scratched the bit that Toothless couldn't quite reach in between the spokes on his back. He made the dragon's life as close to dragon heaven as he possibly could. By mid-February, the winter was coming to an end on Berk, and the snowy season had turned into the rainy season, and it was the kind of weather where your clothes never got dry, no matter what. Hiccup would hang up his sodden tunic on his chair in front of the fire before going to bed at night, and in the morning it would still be wet, warm and wet rather than cold and wet, but wet nonetheless. The ground all around the village had turned into knee-deep mud. What in Woden's name are you doing? Asked Fishlegs when he came across Hiccup digging a large hole just outside the house. Building a mud wallow for Toothless, panted Hiccup. You spoil that dragon, you really do, said Fishlegs, shaking his head. It's psychology, you see, said Hiccup. It's clever, and it's subtle, not like that caveman yelling you're doing with Horror Cow. Fishlegs named his dragon Horror Cow, the horror bit was to make the poor creature at least sound a bit frightening. The cow bit was because for a dragon she really was remarkably like a cow. She was a large, peaceful, brown creature with an easygoing nature. Fishlegs suspected she might even be a vegetarian. I'm always catching her nibbling at the woodwork, he complained. Blood, Horror Cow, blood, that's what you should want. Nonetheless, maybe Fishlegs was better yeller than Hiccup, or maybe Horror Cow was a lazier and more obliging character than Toothless. But Horror Cow was proving very easy to train by the yelling method. Okay, Toothless, it's ready, said Hiccup. Get yourself a good wallow. Toothless stopped trying to catch a voles and leaped into the mud. He rolled over and over in the oozy muck, spreading his wings and squirming happily. I'm bonding with him, said Hiccup, so he'll want to do what I say. Hiccup, said Fishlegs, as Toothless sucked up a good mouthful of mud and spat it right onto Hiccup's face. I may not know much about dragons, but I do know they are the most selfish creatures on earth. No dragon is ever going to do what you want out of gratitude. Dragons do not know what gratitude is. Give up. This will never work. The thing about dragons, said Toothless helpfully, is we're survivors. We're not like sappy cats or dumb dogs, falling in love with their masters and yucky things like that. Only reason we ever do what a man wants is because he's bigger than us and give us food. What's he saying? Asked Fishlegs. Pretty much what you're saying, said Hiccup. Never trust a dragon, said Toothless cheerfully, hopping out of the wallow and helping himself to one of the winkles that Hiccup had found for him. Toothless was particularly fond of winkles. Just like picking your nose, he had said. That's what my mother taught me in the nest, and she should know. Hiccup sighed. It was true, Toothless was cute to look at and very good company, if a little demanding. However, you only had to look into his big, innocent, heavily lashed eyes to realize he was totally without morals. The eyes were ancient, the eyes of a killer. You might as well ask a crocodile or shark to be your friend. Hiccup wiped the mud off his face. I'll think of something else, said Hiccup. February turned into March, and Hiccup was still thinking. A few flowers made the mistake of appearing and were immediately blasted out of existence by a couple of hard frosts. that had kept themselves back for the very purpose. Fishleg could now get Horcow to go and stay on command. Hiccup was still struggling to teach Toothless the basic of toilet training. No pooing in the kitchen, said Hiccup for the 100th time, carrying Toothless outside after yet another accident. Is warmer in the kitchen, whined Toothless. But poos go outside, you know that, said Hiccup. And at the end of his tether, Toothless promptly pooed all over Hiccup's hands and down his tunic. Is outside, is outside, is outside, crowed Toothless. As the inopportune moment, Snotlot and Dog's Breath came sauntering past Stoic's house on the way back from the beach, their dragons on their shoulders. Well, 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 sneered Snotlot. If it isn't the useless, covered in dragon poo, it actually quite suits you. Her, snorted Dog's Breath. That's not a dragon, jeered Sea Slug, Dog Breath's dragon, who was an ugly great Gronkel with a pug nose and a mean temper. That's a newt with wings. That's not a dragon, scoffed Fireworm, Snotlot's dragon, who was as big of a bully as her master. That's an ickle newborn bunny wabbit with a pathetic poo problem. Toothless gave a gasp of fury. Snotlot showed Hiccup the immense heap of fish they had wrapped up in a cloak. Look what Firestorm and Sea Slug caught down at the beach. And it only took them a couple of hours. Firestorm coughed, flexed a shiny muscle or two, and looked at her claws in fake modesty. Oh, please, she drawled. I wasn't even concentrating. If I was trying, I could do it in 10 minutes with one wing tied behind my back. Excuse me while I throw up, muttered Toothless to Horcow, who was regarding Fireworm with disapproval in her big brown eyes. We reckon Fireworm could be a bit of a hunting legend, grinned Snotlot. I hear that Horcow is partial to carrots. Has the Toothless Wonder gotten up the nerve to attack a vegetable? Carrots are a bit crunchy, but perhaps he can manage the odd squished cucumber. You could give it to him through a straw, perhaps. Her. Dog's Breath laughed so hard that snot came snorting out of his nose. Careful, Dog's Breath, said Fishleg politely. Your brains are coming out. Dog Breath bashed him hard, and the two boys staggered off, Fireworm making a lunge at Toothless that nearly took his eye out, and as he went past, as soon as they were safely out of earshot, Toothless jumped out of Hiccup's arms, coughed out a sheet of flames in a menacing manner. Bullies! Yellow bellies, come closer, and Toothless will fry you to a frazzle. Toothless will drag out your guts and play them on a harp. Toothless will, well, you just better not come any closer, that's all. Oh, very brave, Toothless, said Hiccup sarcastically. If you shout louder, they might even hear you. Okay, well, that's the end of that chapter. So we found out that, from Toothless, actually, that dragons are selfish. So they only do things when they know they're going to get food. If they give you food, they'll do stuff for you. If you don't, they won't. We also met some bad dragons, or woolly dragons, I should say, with Sea Slug and Firestorm, right? Yeah, Fireworm. So the training's not going well for our friend. So let's see if it helps in the next chapter at all. 9. Fear, vanity, revenge, and silly jokes. March turned into April, and April turned into May. After Fireworm's remark about the pathetic bunny wabbit, Toothless never pooed in the kitchen again, but Hiccup hadn't made any further progress in training him. It was still raining, but it was a warm rain. The wind was blowing, but it was less a furious wind, and it was just about possible to stand upright. The gulls' eggs were hatching on the rocks, and the parents' gulls dive-bombed Hiccup and Fishlegs as they came to the long beach to practice. Kill, Horcow, kill, said Fishleg to Horcow, who was calmly perched on his shoulder. He could have that black-backed gull for breakfast. He's barely half your size. Honestly, Hiccup, I give up. I don't know how I'm going to pass the hunting section of the test. Horcow just doesn't have the killer instinct. She'd never survive in the wild. Hiccup laughed hollowly. You think you've got problems? Toothless and I are failing right from the beginning. The basic obedience commands, the retrieval, the compulsory exercises, the hunting, the lot. It can't be that bad, said Fishlegs. Watch, said Hiccup. The boys moved along the beach a bit out of the range of the gulls. They started practicing the most basic command of all, go. The dragon was supposed to stand bolt upright on the handler's outstretched arm. The handler would then bark the command as loudly as possible while simultaneously lifting his arm to fling the dragon into the air. The dragon was supposed to soar gracefully into flight when the handler's arm reached the highest point. Horikow yawned, scratched, and slowly flapped off, grumbling to herself. Toothless was even less obedient. Go, yelled Hiccup. Hiccup flung his arm up and Toothless hung on. I said go, Hiccup repeated in frustration. Why go? Shuddered Toothless, gripping even tighter. Just go, 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 screamed Hiccup, flapping his arm up and down frantically, with Toothless hanging on to it for dear life. Toothless stayed. Toothless, said Hiccup as reasonably as he could, please go. If you don't start going when I tell you to, we are both going to be thrown into exile. But I don't want to go, Toothless pointed out equally reasonably. Fishleg watched the whole process in appalled amazement. You really do have a problem. You really do have problems, he said in an odd voice. Yep, said Hiccup. He finally managed to uncurl Toothless's claws, which had relaxed their grip for a second and pushed him off. Toothless landed on the sand with a squeal of outrage, immediately attached himself to Hiccup's leg, getting a good grip on the sandals with his talons and wrapping his wings around Hiccup's calf. Not going, said Toothless stubbornly. It can't get much worse than this, said Hiccup, so I'm going to try a new tack. He took out the notebook in which he had been jotting down all he knew about dragons in the hope that it might be useful. Dragon motivation, Hiccup read aloud. Number 1, gratitude, Hiccup sighed. Number 2, fear. That works, but I can't do it. 3, 4, 5, greed, vanity, and revenge. Those are all worth a try. 6, jokes and riddling talk, only if I'm desperate. This has got to be a first, drawled Fishleg. I'm with Goober and the Belch on this one. Why don't you just yell a bit louder? Hiccup ignored him. Okay, Toothless, said Hiccup to the little dragon, who was pretending to be asleep as he held Hiccup's leg. For every fish you catch me, I will give you 2 more lobsters when you get home. Toothless opened his eyes. Alive, he said eagerly. Can Toothless kill them? Please, just this once? No, Toothless, said Hiccup firmly. I keep on telling you it isn't kind to torture creatures smaller than yourself. Toothless closed his eyes again. You're so boring, he said sulkingly. You're such a clever, quick dragon, Toothless, Hiccup flattered. I bet you could catch more fish than any others on the Thursday if you wanted to. Toothless opened his eyes and to consider the matter. Twice as many, he said modestly, but I don't want to. This was unanswerable. Hiccup crossed vanity off his list. You know that big red fireworm big dragon who was so rude to you, said Hiccup? Toothless spat on the ground in indignation. Said I was a newt with wings. Said I was an incontinent bunny rabbit. Toothless going to kill her. Toothless going to scratch her to death. Toothless is going to... Yes, said Hiccup hastily. That fireworm dragon and her master, who looks like a pig, think that fireworm is going to catch more fish than anybody else at the Thursday celebrations. Think how stupid they are going to look if you win the prize for the most promising dragon instead of her. Toothless got off of Hiccup legs. I will think about that, said Toothless. He waddled off a couple feet and thought about it. 5 minutes later, he was still thinking. He let out the odd chuckle every now and then, but every time Hiccup would say, so now what about it then? He'd just reply, still thinking, go away. With a sigh, Hiccup put a line through revenge. Okay, said Fishlegs, looking over the top of Hiccup's shoulders. You tried everything else. How about jokes and riddling talk? I assume you're desperate. Toothless, said Hiccup. If you can catch me a nice big mackerel, you'll be the cleverest, fastest dragon on Berk. And you will make that fireworm dragon look like an idiot. And you will have all the lobster you can eat when we get home. And I will tell you a really good joke. Toothless turned around. Toothless loves jokes. He flapped onto Hiccup's arm again. All right, Toothless. Toothless help you, but not because me being nice or anything yucky. No, no, said Hiccup. Of course not. Us dragons cruel and mean, but we do love a joke. Tell me now. Hiccup laughed. No way, after you bring me a mackerel. Okay, then, said Toothless. He jumped off of Hiccup's arm into the air. A dragon hunting is a very impressive sight, even a scrawny infant one like Toothless. He flew across the beach in his usual untidy, lopsided fashion, shrieking a few insults along the way, any cormorants that looked smaller than him. But as soon as he reached the sea, Toothless seemed to grow a bit. The sea salt awoke in him some ancestral memory of the great pedigree hunting monsters that were his forefathers. He spread out his wing like a kite and flew fairly swiftly over the surface of the choppy waves, keeping his body and wings steady as he searched for the movement of fish. Okay. He spotted something and soared upwards in circles until he was so high that Hiccup, craning his neck backwards on the beach, could only just see him as a tiny speck. The speck was motionless for a second, and then Toothless dived his wings folded by his side, dropping like a stone out of the sky. He disappeared into the water and was gone for quite a while. Dragons can stay underwater for at least 5 minutes if they want to, and Toothless got quite distracted under there, chasing one fish and then another, unable to decide which was the biggest. Hiccup had gotten bored and was looking for oysters when Toothless came bursting triumphantly out of the sea, carrying a small mackerel. He dropped the mackerel at Hiccup's feet, did 3 somersaults in a row, and landed on Hiccup's head. He let off the dragon's cry of triumph, which is a bit like a rooster. Like a rooster crowing, but a lot louder and more self-satisfied. Then he leaned over and stared into Hiccup's eyes upside down. Now tell me a joke, said Toothless. Whispering Woden, said Hiccup. He did it. He really did it. Tell me a joke, said Toothless again. What's black and white and red all over? Asked Hiccup. Toothless didn't know. A sunburned penguin, replied Hiccup. It was a very, very old joke, but apparently it had made it to a wild dragon cliff. Toothless thought it was hysterically funny. He flew off to catch another fish so he could hear more jokes. It was an enjoyable afternoon. The rain stopped and the sun shone, and Toothless didn't do too badly at all with the hunting. He dropped a few fish at one point, wandered off entirely to chase rabbits on the cliff tops. But he came back when Hiccup called, and eventually by the end of the couple of hours, he had caught 6 medium-sized mackerel and a dogfish. All in all, Hiccup was pretty satisfied. After all, he said to Fishlegs, it's not like I'm expecting to win the prize for most promising dragon or anything. All I need is to show that Toothless is basically under my control for him to catch a few fish. We'll make fool of ourselves compared to Snotlot and his beastly hunting legend, but at least we'll have passed initiation. What was more, as Toothless dropped the last mackerel on the heap in front of Hiccup, Fishlegs noticed something sharp and gleaming in the dragon's lower jaw. Toothless had gotten his first tooth, said Fishleg. Seems a very good omen. As they staggered home, they passed Old Wrinkly, who had been sitting on a rock watching them for the past couple of hours. Very impressive, wheezed Old Wrinkly, as the boys showed him the fish wrapped in Hiccup cloak. We reckon that Hiccup might pass the final initiation test on Thursday, said Fishlegs excitedly. So you're still worrying about that piddly little test, are you, Hiccup? Said Old Wrinkly. There's larger concerns, you know. There's a ginormous storm brewing up, and for instance, and it should hit us about 3 days. Piddly little test, said Fishlegs indignantly. What do you mean, piddly little test? The Thursday Festival is the biggest event of the year. Everybody who is anybody will be there. All of the hairy hooligans and all the meatheads. Plus, this may not seem important to you, but anybody who fails this piddly little test gets put into exile to get eaten up by the cannibals or something equally gruesome. I'm not going to call myself Hiccup the Useful and his dragon Toothful, said Hiccup, beaming. I thought of it just now, and I'm really pleased with it. It's solid, dependable, most likely flashy, not too flashy, but not too much to live up to. The reptile finally got his act together and caught some fish, said Fishleg, pointing at Toothless, who was picking his nose with one claw. Incredible though as it may seem. Hiccup may pass this test after all. Oh, I think it's almost a certainty, said Al. Said Old Wrinkly, looking at Toothless, who was now attempting to cross his eyes and was falling down in the process. Almost, repeated Old Wrinkly. Thoroughly the boys went home, with Toothless following behind them, whining, oh, carry me, it's not far, my wings ache. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. So, did Hiccup get Toothless to do stuff that he needed? Sorry. Did he? Yes, he did. He bribed him with jokes. A lot of people like the jokes, so I guess how that works. Does Hiccup think he's going to win the trophy? No, he's pretty sure he won't win. He's not too worried about it. The only thing, I mean, that was a pretty important chapter, but that was the big points I just said. So, we will continue the book next time, and hoping we shouldn't be too far off here soon. Okay, well, until next time, we'll read some more of How to Train Your Dragons.